The idea of consent orders for property can bring up a lot of questions and confusion about what they are, what they cover, and what this means for you and your family. So tell me, Nardine, what should the consent orders cover?
So I know it sounds simple, but the consent order has to cover everything about property, because if you miss something out, then it's not covered by a court order. So you have to think about everything that you might need to deal with in your property. So it's not just your house, it might be your car, it might be your superannuation. And the important thing to make sure you do is, if you are not going to swap assets, so if you're going to keep your car or keep your super, it has to say that in the consent order. And
tricky.
People miss that all the time.
I bet. So what are some things to look out for then?
Well, that sort of thing, to make sure that you have covered off on every single thing that you want to deal with in the consent order. You have to make sure that the orders, if you're trying to do them yourself, are clear and there's no vagueness, there's no misunderstanding or misinterpretation about what you're actually doing with your consent order.
You wouldn't recommend people really do them by themselves, though?
No, look, there's two parts to it. There's the application and then there's the minutes of consent, which is what you're actually asking the court to order. So the application is online, you can fill most of that in yourself, but the actual minutes, that the wife transfer to the husband her share in the property at blah, 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 I don't know how anyone is going to know how to word that properly. So that's the tricky part. And the things that you have to be careful for is, as I said, make sure you deal with everything. One example might be if you're to be given a sum of money, make sure there's a default clause in there. So if you've agreed that you're going to receive $40,000 from your ex-partner, what's going to happen if he or she doesn't pay? So one of the things you can do is have a default clause. If he or she doesn't pay, then the house goes on the market, gets sold, you get your $40,000. But people miss that step. Yeah, so there's
don't do it yourself, people. Don't do it yourself. Do not DIY consent orders, basically.
Yeah. What you can do is you can fill in as much of it yourself as you can, and that saves quite a bit of time and money.
Yep.
And then bring it to us and we'll finish it off for you.
Make sure it's correct and fine and you're not missing anything, like their Cayman accounts and
that's right. Yes.
So what about some tips and tricks then?
So making sure everything is covered off. One tip that we put in consent orders is what happens if someone changes their mind and refuses to sign. So there's an order that you can get that says the registrar of the court will sign. So that way you protect it. Default clauses, as I said, making sure everything is worded properly, making sure everything is precise and not too vague. So lots of things to think about, unfortunately. I think they do that deliberately so that people come and see lawyers.
But that's what you're specialised in, and most parents aren't specialised in law, so that's why we have specialists. If you needed treatment for a rash, you wouldn't just Google it. You'd go and see a specialist. Exactly. So rash is probably a bad example, but when I was thinking about ex-partners and consent orders, rash is what came up.
Well, there we go. So it is a good idea to get some advice. Do it yourself as best you can. Draft up what you wanted the orders to say, and then take it to someone and get them to make sure that it's really what says what you want it to say, and that it achieves the effect that you want it to achieve.
Love it. So when it comes to any type of order, it's important they're fully understood by both parties. So if you have any questions or concerns about consent orders, whether it be property or something else, don't hesitate to get in contact with the team at Collier Lawyers today. But don't do it yourself. You really need a lawyer to help you with consent orders.